Hi, good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Dotson, and I'm the founder and program coordinator for Highland Park Poetry. I'm really pleased to have a special guest with me today, Susan T. Moss. She is going to be our featured poet at an event in April, which is National Poetry Month, and that's going to be on Saturday, April 25th at 8 o'clock at Madame Zuzu's on Roger Williams. And she's going to be our featured poet, and the reason we're celebrating her is the recent publication of her new book, In From the Dark, which just was published this year, or
September 2014.
Okay, September 2014, and by a company called Antrim House Press. And so we're celebrating this nice publication, and it's a beautiful book.
Oh,
really is.
Thank you.
Really
I
is
appreciate
lovely.
that
Yeah,
very much.
it's a haunting cover, and great content. I mean, from the sample that I was able to read, it's a really lovely book. I haven't actually seen your first publication, which is Keep Moving Till the Music Stops, which was a chapbook published by Lilypool Swamp Press. Okay, but you're very prolific. You've had work appear in the Vermont Literary Review. I'm going to mispronounce this.
Caduceus.
Oh, Caduceus. Okay. After Hours, Seeding the Snow, Out of Line, A Light Breakfast, DuPage Valley Review, East on Central, our local Journal of Arts and Letters, and your daily poem, among other publications. And you've also appeared on Word Slingers. That sounds like fun, which is a radio program at WLUW-FM. Mm-hmm. And you've served 2 terms as president of the Illinois State Poetry Society. You're a member of the Poets Club of Chicago and Poets and Patrons. And you've been awarded a writing residency at the Vermont Studio Center, and you hold a Master of Arts degree from Middlebury College, the Breadloaf School of English. Well, you're quite an accomplished poet. And obviously, since you have a degree in it, you started writing poetry a long time ago. When was that in your development as a writer?
When I was a little girl.
Oh, okay. All right.
The first time I remember that I wrote a poem was when I was little, and the full moon was out, and I was so drawn. I had to open my window shade, and I looked at that moon, and then I got a pencil and a little scrap of paper and wrote my first rhyming poem.
Oh my goodness! Wow. Okay. So that and I guess you got enough positive reinforcement from that experience that you wanted to continue and keep going.
Well, it kept coming back to me. I was, and I still am, very called by that form of writing. Although I do actual prose writing as well, and do a lot of that for my leadership role in the Illinois State Poetry Society. But I think I like the succinct quality, the condensing of ideas into something that just, for me, penetrates right to the core of what I'm trying to do.
The impact of the compact.
Exactly. Exactly.
Cool. Well, talk to us a little bit about your new book, In From the Dark. Was there sort of an overall theme that you were working with, or how did this sort of particular manuscript come together for you?
It's a good question. It's most of this book is really about time and memory, and that's something that just constantly speaks to me. And place, time and place are my probably overriding, influencing concepts. But this one in particular is looking back to youth, and then looking to the present and future, to try to place all of what I understand at this point in my life into some understanding, some form that will hold them in place as time keeps moving forward. I want to glue them on the page, what I know so far, and what I observe.
Well, actually, before we get too involved in any discussion, why don't we give our listeners and viewers a sample of some of your writing in the new book?
Okay, thank you. The book is divided into 2 sections. The first section is called Echoes, And the second section is called Nothing to Regret. So I'll just start in the order, since it took so long to put them in this order. I might as well start with this order.
Yes, people don't understand how agonizing the structuring of book can be.
Well,
you can talk about that. That
yeah.
would be a good question.
Do you want me to do that first or do this?
No, you
oh,
can
okay.
read it, and then
All right.
But we
All right.
wanna...
So this first one is called Encore, and it sort of sets this background of the childhood concept and what I yearn for in some ways. Encore. I remember the lilac's June perfume, the clicking and shushing of a push mower in early May, the first frothy drifts of December rolled into a snowman with cedar bough arms and button grin. I remember Father's stories of Bronco Bill the Sailor, Elizabeth Kokunchkakite, and Grandpa Snazzy, told with gravel, bass, and trilling voices. In bedtime adventures, he would chisel and sculpt. I want, like Arachne, to spin a web, pull taut the threads to capture echoes unraveling through time. And like Persephone springing from memory's shadow, renew lavender tales that never fade, to make angels in winter's first snow. So is the start.
Okay.
One that relates to that is a piece about my father and his hats. My father, as you'll hear at the end, had a sad demise, but I wanted to capture those hats, and I wanted to capture, through the hats, something about my father.
Okay.
So it's called Dad's Chapeau. My father loved hats, especially fedoras that he wore to the edge of their popularity. They had the Humphrey Bogart look and perched on a curved metal rack in the living room closet. One Brown Prize was for train trips to the city as a mechanical engineer, and is the memory I have of him from early fall to late spring. Another brimmed classic made of soft tan suede served as casual wear and looked jaunty at a slight tilt over his left brow. The black felt with summer cut served for weddings, funerals, or church when men dressed in their finest. A brown baseball cap was probably Dad's favorite, but maybe it was mowing the lawn or grilling over the stone pit he built 50 summers ago that made him so happy and left dark sweat stains on the headband, not knowing then that unlike the Mad Hatter, whose mercury-cured hat drove him insane, Alzheimer's long shadow would retire the collection we left hanging for many years. One day, my mother gave Dad's hats to other people. They never quite fit.
Oh, wow. Okay. And you capture so powerfully that it's the idea that objects that we associate with people have really resonate so strongly, and you really evoke the different ways your dad wore hats, and it was very beautiful, very beautiful.
Thank you. It was it was special for me to write. You know,
Yeah.
it just meant something. Well, they all do, but that just
Sure.
spoke to me particular, I think.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, and then as I touched on before we forget, I was talk to me about the process of assembling this manuscript and the ordering process.
Okay. Well, once I had many, many, many more poems, and when I worked with the editor, he felt that while they were poems I could use again somewhere else, they weren't necessarily going to fit into this sort of tight composition he was looking for.
Oh, now that brings up a good question. Did Antrim House Press contact you, or did you submit a manuscript?
I submitted.
Oh, okay.
And I was very fortunate that he liked my
Yeah.
work and was very willing to work with me. And we worked for a long time,
Oh, okay.
back and forth, back and forth. And he would edit a word, and we'd discuss whether that could stay or go. And you know, I would debate, and he'd say, "Well, you know." So I worked very hard on trying to cull and then arrange, and I had learned a trick when I had my writing residency in Vermont, a woman I had put all of her work on walls, taped them on the wall,
Oh.
and then she moved them around. I thought, well, I'll just clear off the walls in my dining room
Okay.
and try this.
Okay.
So everybody who came over for dinner was like, oh, what's this? So I just kept moving them around.
Okay.
And it really helped because I wasn't looking down on the floor.
Right.
I was looking straight at them. And honestly, you can see them differently when you look straight at them. And I could see whole stanzas that didn't belong there.
Oh, okay.
And it was
All right.
really interesting process. So I did go in some kind of thematic and time concept together. So usually the theme and the time were similar, but the themes run throughout here. So
Right.
it was more about, picking up something about father. He told me stories. Then that would seem to go with his hat. So you could
Okay.
just sort of take a word or an image or a concept, and then just pick it up again, a thread that would weave through.
That's almost like the poetry wheel that Tom
Yes.
Roby does, where
Yes.
someone reads a poem and then
Yeah.
you follow by either an image or pulling from that. So that you sort of did that. There needed to be some sort of continuity from poem to
Right.
poem,
Right.
and not just in terms of the thematic. But,
Right, that's
yeah.
right. I think there
Okay.
has to be something that's conscious or unconscious in the reader.
Yeah.
In their either the voice, if they're reading it out loud, that they hear a word again, or that word creates an image, and then that image sticks in the brain, and then you kind of just make the connection for the book itself.
Yeah.
You're in alliance with the book.
Right. Well, it's great that you're talking about this idea, because also in April, on April 7th, East on Central and Highland Park Poetry, we're having a program at the library called Wrestling the Manuscript.
Ah.
And while the program is designed for both prose writers as well as poetry writers, I think the challenge is really with the poetry writers, because so often we amass, published poems, and we want to put them into a collection, but we don't have, it's like, where do I begin?
Right.
And so the methods that you've talked about, I'll certainly be sure to mention at that program in April,
and
because
it may not work for everyone,
right.
but it just spoke to me once I tried it.
Yeah.
It was great.
Because actually I've tried doing the thing on the floor where you're spraying
And
out
then
the
your
poems.
back breaks.
Okay, all right. You speak from experience.
I tried it. Didn't go.
Okay, so it's up on the wall. That's
Right,
much better.
right,
All right,
right.
well, we'll stick with that. And then it sounds like you had the good fortune to work with an editor who was very engaged
Yes.
with you in this manuscript, in its refinement. I've talked to other poets on this show, on this program, where really they had to do all of the polishing of the manuscript in advance before they submitted it for consideration, and that really their publishers were, they were just saying, oh, I like this product, and it's finished, and I don't have to do any work except produce it and sell it.
Yeah, and that's such a relative thing. I only tilted a couple a couple words here, a couple words
Okay.
there. It was not actually rewriting any poem. And he simply, he pretty much went along with exactly how I had set it up in terms of what goes first, second, third, etc.
Okay.
It was more, would you like to try a different place for the comma, or drop the comma, or
Okay.
use a word, a small word that maybe wasn't what he thought would read as well. So
Okay.
he himself is a fine poet, and I think so he's reading from a position of being a poet and also as an editor
Yeah.
and the publisher. So I think I had the benefit of those little nuances that he was willing to offer. And again, he would say, but if you love it this way,
Oh.
then don't
Wow.
change it. So a couple times I didn't. But
Yeah.
most of the time we would talk about it, and I would get the logic of it, or not, and then we'd go with it one way or the other. So
Well, now, we also mentioned this is your second publication. You did a chapbook first for the Lily Pool Swamp Press.
Right, yes.
I love the name.
he goes by both,
Oh,
and it
okay.
depends on what he's publishing.
Oh, okay.
But with that one, that was strictly he took it and
As is.
and it was as is, and
So a different experience.
very different
the publishers.
experience. And that's a very different book because that was a hand set
Oh
book,
my.
and it's
Oh,
more
wow.
of an art style book. I used my own photography, a piece for the cover, and he made
Okay.
a cover to go around it. And so that picture is
Oh,
part of that, and
wow.
then there's a little picture at the back. So the cover is an old truck. I saw a picture, actually the real thing. I saw it
Okay.
in New Hampshire, and I took a picture of it, and I used that as keep moving.
Okay.
And then
alright.
the end is an old piano I saw in a barn.
Oh my goodness.
And I
all
took a
right.
picture of that, so it's till the music stops, and that's how we came
I
up with the
see.
title.
Okay. Oh wow. Very
Yeah.
clever.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Now that he did help me with the title.
Right. Okay.
But the rest of it, pretty much he said, if this is how you want it, this is
Oh,
how it's
wow.
going to go.
Okay.
So just a different approach. He was more into the publishing and the art of publishing.
Right.
That was his thing more than the editing. He wasn't so
Okay.
much an editor.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
Well, definitely a different process.
Right.
Process for
Right.
you.
Yes, and with Antrim, I have to say, he also puts out newsletters and advertises and does a lot of work for the poet.
Okay. Do you have, in addition to your event with Highland Park Poetry, do you have other readings, or did he schedule
Well,
events
if I
for
were in
you, or-
Connecticut, and I will go to
Okay.
Connecticut at some point, he's out of Connecticut. When I go, sometime this year, he will set something up and probably do
Okay.
a film of me reading something.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yes, I will be reading at the bookstall at Chestnut Court in April, and and I will be reading at the Gallery Cabaret
Oh.
down on Oakley.
Okay.
I am a featured reader in April also.
Oh, wonderful.
Mhm.
Great. I was also going to ask you, I completely discombobulated my notes. Oh, okay. Yes, inspirations for writing. Obviously, memory seems to be a key to some of your poems. What are some of the other inspirations for your writing?
I will answer it simply, but I'll give you more in-depth
Okay.
answer. I honestly believe that anything can be a poem.
Okay.
Anything could be made into a poem. And that one of them I'll read is driving down a highway and what I saw and hearing something on the radio. And that just spoke to me as a poem. Riding the fast train in Spain, what I saw out the window. So that was more of a place poem.
Okay.
If I hear some music, perhaps, which is what I'll mention in that poem, somebody might say something. I wrote a poem riding on the CTA, just
Okay.
because I was,
Yes.
and that was more of an observation poem about the people. And
Well, since you mentioned the CTA poem, that poem has been selected to appear at the Highland Park Public Library
whoa,
because
how
there's
nice.
a collaboration between Highland Park Poetry and the Illinois State Poetry Society. We're doing which the Illinois State Poetry Society had announced that transportation was the theme for
Yes.
this month, April, this poetry month, and so we'll be at the Highland Park Library. We'll be doing a display of both poems by both Illinois State Poetry Society members and Highland Park Poetry, and
Right.
so it should be a lot of fun.
Wonderful.
I hope that people watching can also be sure to check out the library.
yes, and that's a
go.
beautifully done display.
Oh,
I've come.
great,
I came
thanks.
last year to
Oh,
see
good.
it, and it was
Excellent.
really well done.
Excellent.
Yes.
Thanks so
Oh,
much. Well, why
sure.
don't you read another
Okay,
one?
okay.
To be good.
All right, and so speaking of a road trip, and I will admit that sometimes it's better to write something down immediately.
Oh.
So I won't tell you how fast I was going as I was writing about this. I did finish it at home, however.
Okay, that's good.
It's called Road Trip. 3 hours down the highway between St. Paul and Chicago, my life songs begin to sing on the radio. Chances are to Hound Dog, The miles slip into years while Wisconsin bison stand in snowy corn stubble, and another station advises women to be good role models for their daughters who should learn to treat their husbands right. A donation of $14 will buy a book on how to create domestic harmony. Which brings me back to the oldies station and the soundtrack of my youth, speaking in Father Knows Best voices, saccharine with myth and promises. Farms fade into prefab houses, spreading like buckthorn over rolling prairie. And there's that song, Country Roads. But that's West Virginia, not the Midwest F. Scott Fitzgerald tried to forget. A store offering naughty novelties begins the end of radio signals, tracing my way home.
Well, you mentioned, obviously you paid a little bit of homage to F. Scott Fitzgerald there. What are some of your favorite writers?
Poets, or yes?
Oh, I guess whatever inspires you or makes you excited about words and language.
Well, that's, yes. I mean, I could name many, 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 many.
Okay.
I really like Ted Kooser. I think he captures a certain essence of life in a simpler way, and he's, in a speaking, everyday tone way. I like Mary Oliver, Jane Hirschfield, Merwin, Cannell, Galway Cannell, Robert Frost, of course, and
that's required, I think, when you go across the straight lines into Vermont, right?
Of course. Oh yes, I've been to the cabin he's written in, in his tombstone. But I really loved the way The Great Gatsby read.
Okay.
I've always been taken with that one, and I think it captures a real issue about the American dream.
Okay.
And that has informed my work a lot too, just as a background setting of the myths, what we hope for, what the disappointments are that we wind up with sometimes because we grow up in this fairy tale kind of belief system.
Right.
And then how do we handle that as we grow wiser, hopefully?
Yeah, hopefully.
And stronger.
And I did want to touch on your involvement with these different poetry groups. Illinois State Poetry Society, you were your past president. You served at least, what, 2 terms?
And I am now, too.
Oh, and you are? Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. So this is you're in your 2nd term then?
Yes.
Okay. And then you're also involved with Poets and Patrons and the Poets Club of Chicago. Can you give us like a brief overview of these different groups? And
I'll try to do justice.
All right. All right.
to everyone
Don't mean
else.
to put you on the spot.
No.
Okay.
Well, I'll start with ISPS, Illinois State Poetry Society. Illinois State Poetry Society. We are one of many chapter affiliates of the National Federation of State Poetry Societies in this country. And we have 5 chapters that are actually physical chapters. We have an at-large membership, and we have members from all over the country who belong to that.
So you don't have to live in Illinois
you don't.
to join?
In fact,
okay.
Several people don't. And then we have an online critique session as well as the actual face-to-face critique sessions. And one of them, the closest one to here, is in Northbrook, actually, at the public library. We meet at public libraries. And so we do critiquing of each other's work. The Society offers a newsletter. We have a very nice website, and we can be put on the website as well, our poetry. And we have workshops that we offer, and a convention to go to, and it's very lively. We keep trying to grow. And then Poets and Patrons, which we have become quite close with, which is great. We're going to be sharing a table this summer at Printers Row, and a table at the Poetry Fest at the Washington Library.
Oh, great.
And many of our members overlap, so we have a real close relationship with them. And that group has also critiquing, but more of the type where they ask someone to read the submitted pieces, and then they give feedback at the meeting to everyone, and everyone hears that one set of feedback for each poem.
Right.
And then they sponsor a lot of really nice workshops that are all over the city, which is very nice. And then the Poets Club of Chicago is actually the longest ongoing poetry group in Chicago. And-
How
well,
long?
I want to say the 30s.
Oh, wow, okay.
Mhm.
That does go back a few
Yes,
years.
and we meet, right now we're meeting at Powell's, a bookstore on Halsted near Roosevelt, and we meet once a month and we critique. Also, we do one-to-one critiquing. And so it's really nice for me because then I get a lot of feedback and I get different opinions about the work. And then
Do you think that participating in this process helps you become published? Because, I mean, it seems almost like a polishing.
it's a polishing, that's true.
You know.
It is, and yes, I would say it helps me to feel confident about sending those
Okay.
pieces out. Because I think, because I trust the poets, and they're good poets, and you know, whatever that means, but
Right.
you know, and I think it does help. It's very useful. It's very helpful. But you know, sending out is a whole other
Right.
thing. You know, that
Yeah.
takes enormous
Well,
time.
but it also, I mean, I'm just saying, confidence, I think, is,
Oh,
is
yes.
the key. That,
Yes.
You know, if you feel like, okay, I've shared this poem with a variety of people, and they've weighed in, and I trust their
Yes.
judgment, and it makes
Right.
you feel, well, so this isn't so bad. It's
That's
worthy
true.
of
That's
worthy
true.
of I'm worthy of publication. Yeah.
Well, and I think it's nice it builds confidence, especially for people who are new at it, and they can read in front of people, and then they build their own personal confidence in reading their own
Right.
pieces aloud,
Yes.
which is nice.
I think we might have time for you to read one more poem.
Okay.
'Cause we've only
All
got
right. I will read the last poem in the book, which I actually wrote when I was at my residency, and it's a true story, but it gave me the title.
Okay.
It's called At Katie's Party. Such wild audacity of a raccoon to wash meticulous paws in the cat's water bowl and eat feline savories garnered by ingenuity, hunger, and scarcity of contrition on his nocturnal quest through the open kitchen door, on the same path we recognize, the one paved with desire to live, eat, bathe in the luxury of home, a sanctuary lit by candlelight on a rainy night when some of us slip off our masks, one sip of wine at a time, and immerse ourselves in talk of music, travel, politics, tidbits we offer and cling to in this chance to come in from the dark.
Wow. Well, thank you. Thanks so much for coming and
Oh,
talking
you're
to us
very
today.
welcome.
And
My pleasure.
we look forward to seeing you in April at Madame Zuzu's. That's Saturday, April 25th at 8 o'clock at Madame Zuzu's on Roger Williams. And we'll get to hear more poems. And we'll really look forward to seeing you again. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah, no, it's a very good time. And, you know, I hope obviously our discussion of some of these other poetry groups inspires some of our listeners to perhaps check out the different opportunities with the Illinois State Poetry Society and Poets and Patrons and the Poets Club of Chicago. I want to make sure I get that right. And all the host of different April activities that we've mentioned, the display at the Highland Park Public Library.
They should all come to see your work.
Oh, yeah, right. Well, thank you. No, that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much.